Don't go anywhere. Come on. We're going to do this one together. Before I begin my remarks, there's a special gentleman here who deserves recognition. A lot of you know him, and those of you who don't ought to. Can we get Renaldo Fowler up here, please? Probably not working. There it is. Now, while he's coming up here, I'll let you know he is the Senior Staff Advocate for the Arizona Center for Disability Law. And we want to make sure to get him some special recognition. I'll be talking selfless service and support for the African American community. Renaldo presents you with this certificate of recognition. Get out of here, we'll do my speech. Little secret, Renaldo and I share. Can I tell a extracurricular activity? Every once in a while, I don't know how many of you know that there's a great little watering hole in Phoenix, Arizona, where you can get a phenomenal cocktail, and on rare occasion, and you can see Renaldo, and sometimes we're there at the same time at the Boom Boom Room down on the Dallas. Story about a 7-year-old boy named Jude. Jude is a young man who has Down syndrome, and he's also autistic. Jude loves to hear music, especially guitar music and made-up fun songs. Jude is in a special classroom where he and a couple of his buddies hang out. And Jude is a really important person because he deserves the kind of respect and dignity that every single one of us and all folks in our community deserve. The reason that I want you to know about Jude is because while he is still nonverbal and his development is certainly not as quick as his mother or his family would like, he's moving forward and he's fighting every day. And one of these days we're going to get him potty trained, but unfortunately, like I had to do this morning, we're going to keep on changing his diapers and taking care of him. Jude's an important part of my life. Just like my grandmother before she passed away. In 1976, when I was a 6-year-old boy, she suffered a stroke that paralyzed the entire left side of her body. And she ended up in a wheelchair. When I first became Maricopa County Recorder, Renaldo in the ACDL, sorry, that's my own dyslexia, it's very mild, approached me and said, there's folks in our community who are going to need help from a person like you in the position that you hold. And I listened. I went down to Abilities 360 and I sat with folks and I listened. And when Maricopa County built the new election system that is engaged now, and using the SIPPIPUP technology and some of the other hearing aids and visual aids that we have in our voting systems, we adjusted those systems with the folks at Abilities 360, listening to people in the community, because how dare us assume that we knew better just because we were in those offices. That would have been the wrong attitude. Now that, my grandmother passed away years ago, Jude's in my life, and it's particularly important now and personal for me to be able to continue the work that we started at Maricopa County. And the ACDL was particularly instrumental in being a partner. When I was the recorder, we worked directly with Renaldo and some of the other lawyers to create a policy that has been adopted and maintains its course to help voters with disabilities in their homes to do the early voting that is necessary. And that's all voters, not just African American voters with disabilities or Hispanic voters with disabilities, all voters with disabilities. And I think one of the most interesting and wonderful things about the community of folks with disabilities is that no two people are the same, just like in any other space. And the way we need to adjust in government, the way we need to accommodate so that individual citizens can, with dignity and independence, fulfill their individual constitutional rights. Maintain that dignity and independence through the process. It isn't what I would call a burden. It's a wonderful challenge that we in government must rise to as we make sure that all American citizens can fulfill their choice and have their voices heard. This is what being a partner in our democracy is about. And this is why I continue to be very dedicated to the work that we did in Maricopa County and now as the Secretary of State that I do. My job as Secretary of State is to ensure that all voters have safe, secure, and accurate elections, the ones that they deserve. And again, that means all voters. Since the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law, our nation has made significant progress. But we have to go even further to knock down the remaining barriers for African American voters and other voters with disabilities. Our work is not yet done. Your right to vote is precious, and our right to vote is the result of many, many decades, nay, centuries of struggle. And we can never take for granted the sacrifices of those who came before us. We can never forget those stories. As hard as they may be to hear, as difficult as it may be to see how poorly some Americans treated other Americans in the past, we can never let our society slip back into what some would cynically and terribly call the good old days. There was nothing good about some of those old days. My speech here goes into talking about early voting, but I feel a little familiar with this crowd, so let me give you a couple of pro tips on early voting. My communications people are freaking out. Early voting is really the best way that you can cast your ballot and have it count. And that's because you can track your ballot and make sure that it got cast, right? Now, if you're an activist, if you're a precinct committee person, you want to encourage all of your people to vote early. Because the more of them who vote early, the less of them you have to change towards election day. Right? You lighten the burden on yourself. Nobody wants to work that hard on election day. Because when the polls close, you don't want to be exhausted. You want to tip a couple back. Make it in the food room and leave them home. But as a voter, let me give you another deeper layer of that pro tip. And here's an important piece for you all to know. Historically, we generally vote in the same communities. We generally know who our representatives are, who our city council people are, school district people as they move up. And if there's any politicians in here, this one's for you. We've got our Pima County recorder, my former boss, Kelly here in the house. Let's give her a big round. I was her first chief deputy after the voters booted me out of Maricopa County in 2020. And I said, "You're a politician now, Gabriella." She says, "I'll never be a politician." Well, look at her now. Anyway, here's the pro tip, voters. Vote early. And about a week and a half ballot was cast and tabulated and counted, find out which campaigns are still trying to get a hold of you. They're the ones that are running bad campaigns. They're the ones that are wasting money because they're not checking to see if you voted early. One of the things I was hoping to do as county recorder was to run a campaign to have folks vote early, and I was going to call it Lock the Knock. Because if you vote early, they're not going to knock on your door anymore. They already know that you voted. And if that's not motive to vote early, I don't know what the heck is. The text messages stop, the emails stop, the door knocking stops. So vote early, folks. I mean, it's not rocket science. And here's another thing that I want to tell you as I wrap up here, because I don't want to take a ton of time. Remember this. Voters are voters are voters. Every single one of our ballot counts. Imagine you're the Attorney General. We lovingly call her Landslide Mays. And you win by 280 votes. Look around this room. How many Arizona voters are in this room right now? Yeah, well, you, 280 of you, put her over the top. And we're going to keep doing what we need to do to improve our systems in the largest counties and the smallest counties across Arizona. We're working on our budget, well, next year's budget, because this year's was terrible. We're working on our budget to try to make sure that all of our counties have the same types of technology that are available in the largest and richest county in Arizona, so that all of the rest of greater Arizona can have the same types of access. We want to make sure that those facilities have paved parking lots, not hard gravel parking lots, for access. We want to make sure that there is plenty of digital access for those rural communities so that they can have vote centers, so that any voter can vote anywhere, preferably at a location that is nearby, so that our friends on indigenous reservations don't have to drive 2.5 hours because the precinct line is drawn inconveniently. More important than all of this, though, is the idea that we don't just speak to voters as if they are parts of subgroups, as if dividing us helps us. Because we all, every single one of us, regardless of ability or skin color or religion or language or any other thing that might divide us, we are all Americans first. We are all voters first. We deserve our voice. We deserve our dignity. We deserve our independence. And I'm so glad to have been invited up here to continue the work that we've done to make sure that that dream is a reality in Arizona and hopefully across the country. I'm your Secretary of State right now, and I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for having me today. Have a wonderful